to Being Black in Corporate America, a candid discussion of the impact of Blackness in the corporate world. I'm your host, T.S. Edwards, author of The Adventures of Hildy and Carlos. And I would like to introduce my guest as moderator. We have Ms. Deetra Giles, founder of Executive Prep, and our panelists, Jackie Russian, Managing Principal at Rich Rush Enterprises and VP of Strategy and Business Development, and Kenneth Stewart, VP of Human Resource and President of Virkin Consultings. So again, we would like to welcome everyone. Let's get it started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Being Black in Corporate America. We are so excited to have you on with us this afternoon as we dive into this very engaging topic around the experience of Black people in the corporate environment. And as you all know, this has been a very hot topic lately because organizations are now being charged with really coming face to face with how they have or have not dealt with DEI, or what we call diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And so today I'm excited to be your host. And I'm going to be moderating this panel of professionals who are in the workplace and doing this real time. So to give you all an idea of how this is going to go, I'm going to introduce the panel. I'm going to ask the panel a few questions that were already submitted, and then we'll give you a chance to ask some questions as well. So you'll get a chance to ask some Q&A, and then we'll close off and give our closing charge to you because you all know me. I'm Deetra Giles, and I'm also a college professor. And what I tell my students is that learning happens when a change in behavior occurs. If there's no change in behavior, you had a good conversation, but you didn't learn anything. Our goal here is to make sure you learn. So we're going to leave you with a charge. What can or should you be doing when you get off of this call to make DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, a very real thing in your organization? So I'll start off by introducing our panel of people, our professionals that will help us in today's conversation. I'll start off with Ken Stewart. Ken, come on for me and give us a 30-second intro about who you are, how you are, and why this topic matters to you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Ken Stewart. I'm a VP of HR, and people is my passion. I've been in HR for over 15 years, and being in the space that I am in, dealing with employee relations, diversity, equity, inclusion, I take that very seriously. And this has been driving me ever since I've been in this career. So this topic today we're discussing is near to my heart.
Wonderful. And Jackie Russian, come on and tell us who you are and give us a little bit about your interest in this topic.
I am Jackie Russian, and I am very excited to be able to talk about this topic today. One of the primary reasons that this topic is important, and it is important now, is because the condition of Black America has evolved and not evolved in a way that is necessary. So those are some of the things that I want to talk about, and I'm very passionate about that.
Wonderful. So our theme for today is really what is the experience of Black people in the corporate environment? And before we even jump into it, here's what I want everyone to understand. Black people, we have a variety of races on this quick session, but we are not a monolithic people. So I want everyone to, first of all, approach this with the idea of that every Black person is not the same. We don't all have the same experience, don't all have the same upbringing. So we will come at it from different perspectives. The other paradigm shift I want us to make in our head is that DEI is for the benefit of the company. Many people approach this topic from the perspective of, oh, as a corporation, we need to help out these poor people who have been underserved and underutilized, and we're benefiting them. The benefactors of DEI are the organization. DEI is about the organization's bottom line. So when we talk about the bottom line, I want to throw this out to everyone on the panel right now for our first starting question. Of course, everyone, this is the big heavy hitter that everyone wants to know. Why should this topic matter to corporate America? I'll throw it out to both of you. Ken, you go ahead and start us off. Why should this matter to corporate America?
One, we can talk about the younger generation. You know, me being heavy on the interview and recruitment side of the business, a lot of millennials want to work for a company that's extremely diverse. They want to work for a company where they see people that look like themselves, and they want to work with a company that is open to new ideas. And I think it's very important that you have diversity to, diversity also equals profitability. You know, in a Harvard business study, it shows that companies that are more diverse tend to be more profitable as well. And I think, the way I like to attack DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion is I like to show what it does for the people, but then I also like to show what it does for the company of how being diverse can affect your bottom line. I think that's extremely important. When leaders at the top, sometimes they only see numbers, but I want to bring and show how DEI affects the entire company all the way around.
And that's true. As professionals, we absolutely have to show the numbers, because here's the reality. DEI is not just what's right socially, it's what right fiscally. If we aren't doing diversity, and think about it, I always throw out the example of the McDonald's campaign, I'm loving it. Well,
Yes.
who left the G off of loving? That is a direct urban vernacular influence. And that campaign has made them tons of money. You have people, the suburban soccer mom with her kids jumping in the minivan, screaming, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm loving it. Well, now you headed to McDonald's because you got that tune in your head. And that is a direct bottom line impact from a DEI influence. So for you, Jackie, tell us why should this topic matter to corporate America? I think we might have lost Jackie. Did we lose you, Jackie? Well, Ken, oh, there you go. I see you coming in.
There you go.
Okay.
I hear you. So tell us, why should this topic matter to corporate America?
I mean, because it's business. Corporate America is about business. Business is about resources. You can't get anything done without people. And so Black Americans matter as much as anyone else. And it is just unthinkable to have a global business where you are selling to Black people collecting Black dollars, but yet and still they're not represented in your corporation. So it should matter to people, it should matter to corporations that the communities that they serve and who spend their dollars with them are not included in the opportunities to share in the economics of the business and society. It's really simple, and we can cut it any way that we want to. We can have long conversations about it. Young people, young minorities belong in corporate America. They have paid the dues, their parents have paid the dues, generationally have paid the dues, and we have built corporations up. I just wrote a post about the CEO of Adidas and Reebok, where they basically said that they did not care about Black Americans or Black Lives Matter in the US. And still, they made their money off of African Americans in the US. So we absolutely should matter in the corporations, and the corporations should care, because we are the ones who are also driving their businesses, spending $1.3 million, $1.3 trillion each year.
Right. And here's the thing. One of the things you talked about earlier is the idea of representation. It's not just about the campaigns and the use of the influence, but it's also about people wanting to see themselves represented in the companies they support and the products that they buy. And so one of the things that has been telling in this situation is you have had companies putting out these big statements. Oh, we support this effort and we support inclusion. And internally, when we start to look at their boards and their senior leaders, we're looking at that senior leadership saying, well, if you support it, why don't we see it? If your organization is diverse and you're inclusive, why do we have to go down 4 levels of leadership to find any person of color at all, and go down even further to find someone that's Black, right? And so, Ken, I'll kick this one to you. Where and how can organizations begin to source Black candidates? Because one of the issues that we hear out there is, where are they? There's just not enough in the pipeline, in the pool. Where do we find these candidates? We want to have more Black professionals, but where do we find them? Where can organizations go to source Black candidates?
Yeah, that's very key, because I want to let organizations know, when you come and you start talking about DEI, it's not just inviting someone in and having a conversation about diversity, and then you just stop there and then you think you're a diverse company. It's a full circle approach, 360 degrees, where, from the recruitment, where are you involved in the communities? Do you have your foot in the door at Black universities? Are you involved in high schools, and do you have a pipeline of people from universities and co-op programs and internship programs? Myself, I'm a member of 100 Black Men of Atlanta, and where we are trying to develop young Black men to move on to college. And a lot of the companies I've worked for, we do programs at universities, but when I started looking at the list of universities, there were 1 or 2 Black universities on that list. And, not having, where you put your money is sometimes where you get your reinvestment from. If you are investing in marketing and going to the career fairs at Black universities, I can tell you 100% you're going to get your return in some good candidates that are going to apply for positions at your company, that are going to help your company grow over time. And that's very important. The investment, where you invest your money is where you're going to see your return from. And I think that's very important.
Absolutely. And so it's so important when you say that people can look at many organizations and find places for people to find people for the pipeline, right? Because we know it's always odd for me when I hear people say, well, the candidates aren't out there. How is that possible? First of all, we know that right now, Black women, specifically Black women in the U.S., are becoming some of the most educated population in the world. So to tell me that there are no candidates out there is saying that the math just doesn't add up to me. When you say there are not enough people educated and experienced for the leadership roles, and I know that this is a population that is highly educated and experienced, the numbers just don't jive. So, Jackie, when we talk about pushing people into those leadership ranks, the first question everyone has is, okay, they say, you know what, we know we've done it wrong. We know we haven't utilized this population the way it should be utilized, and haven't advanced in the way they should be advanced. And we probably should be promoting more people, not because they're Black or because they're women or because they're men, but because they're just qualified. But right now, we have people in those positions. What do? These people haven't been promoted, and but people are in those positions now. How do we handle that? What are you telling those people about that situation? What do they do when they already have people in those positions and there's really no place to promote this population to?
Well, first of all, the one thing that I always ask them is, tell me how you got in this position in the first place. Tell me why it has not been an issue, because I think you have to go back and look at why you don't have any minorities in the first place. That means going back to your recruitment, the interviewing process, and then also as it relates to this pipeline, you have to have a pipeline. And they continue to tell me, well, Jackie, we don't have anybody in the pipeline. And I said, ask them why. Well, there are just not enough, experienced Black people. And I said, well, how do you know that? How do you know that there are not enough experienced Black people? You're going by what you hear. Somebody came up with something about the pipeline, and there are not enough Black people in the pipeline, and all of a sudden that just took fire. As you know, and I know, and it's not just about HBCUs, there are Black, professional, educated, smart people all over this country. And to continue to go back to this BS about there not being anyone in the pipeline is just a deflection, and it is gaslighting, especially when we know that. And your recruiters, your HR people, that's what they do for a living. They're supposed to know how to go to the people market and get you whatever you want. So when they say that to me, I said, well, you have turnover, but you continue to replace them with people who look like you. So that's the issue that you have to deal with, is fixing your recruitment process, your HR process, and then being willing to also promote from within the people that you do have. And as far as experience, you have mediocre people every day. Every day you have mediocre people. You know how I know? You have outages all of the time, your projects go bad, you miss deals. You have a whole lot of bad stuff that's going on. And guess who's not over there leading that? Black people. So don't just accept mediocrity for one group and then say we need to have experienced people with X amount of years of that went to this school. That's a bunch of BS. It's deflection, and it's why you don't grow. And until we start calling that out, it won't change. So I tell them that when they have turnover, they have to designate that that is going to be for a minority. And if there are people say, well, you know, we're having people who are unqualified, I said, well, you always do. What's the difference?
And even speaking to that, Jackie, and it's a conversation for all of us to talk about, is the unrealistic expectations that we're often held to, in that oftentimes we are required to, we feel a burden to represent everyone. Right? We feel this undue burden of representation. If I go in, and I do it and I embrace it proudly, but it's also, I also have to embrace the idea that it's unfair. So when I go in and I present, I know I have to be top notch, not just because I have to be top notch for me, but I have to be top notch because there's someone coming behind me that is going to have to ride off of my performance. And if I perform poorly, then that will be put on them. Whereas oftentimes our white counterparts don't have that same standard put on them. If they perform poorly, that person is a poor performer. We'll hire another white person. If I perform poorly, then that manager thinks, well, I tried that Black person thing. I don't know how that works. Can you all speak to that in the workplace, the impact that that has on us as professionals and our ability to advance and grow in a corporate environment? And
Well,
both of you can jump in on that one.
For me,
Yeah,
I start out by calling it out. I call it I call it BS right there, because I don't represent other Black people. I represent me. And if I fail, it's my failing. It's not your failing. They don't judge Jack when he screws up and has the whole data center going down. So why is it that if I mess up on the project, all Black people are bad? And I call that out. And I ask them the question, and I go and I start listing every person who doesn't look like me, who has messed up with multi-million-dollar deals. And then I ask about this one person. I've seen Black executives fired over simple stuff. When you see white people fail time and time again, and there are excuses made for them. So for me, you know, you just can't feed into the BS, and you've got to call it like it is, you know, in a professional way. But at some point, you're always trying to be political and you want people to hear you, but sometimes you do have to call that out.
Right. So tell us from your perspective, Ken.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely believe it's BS, and I've seen it firsthand where we've hired a Black person, and just like you said, I want to represent Ken. I don't want to represent someone else. I want to be able to represent myself. And what it is, you know, we talk about DE&I, we also want to add a C. I want the same consideration that you're going to give a white person when they make a mistake. As a Black person, I want that same consideration to be given to me as well. We were talking the other day regarding a white guy who applied for a position, lied about having a degree, and once he got the position and they found out he didn't have the degree, the conversation they started having was, we didn't want to get rid of him because we didn't want to affect his way of life or his salary. And what we're asking is, when you do those type of things, would I have gotten that same consideration? And, you know, personally, I'm going to say, no, I wouldn't have gotten that same consideration. When you're talking to a Black man here who has a bachelor's, an MBA, a SPHR, every possible certification you could have in HR, I have. And we're just asking for the same consideration, because I've worked with managers who hired a Black person, and they fired them for poor performance. And then I can tell when we start recruiting again and we're interviewing candidates, they're not going to come out and say out of their mouth the unconscious biases that they have, but I can see it from the people that they're picking, that they're overlooking certain candidates that have a good background, that look good. And at that point, I'm starting to push them of, why not this person? Why not that person? And they're overlooking them because of the previous person.
Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about that, it's a tough road to navigate. In all honesty, it's tough for us to navigate that, because while I do want to be a credit to my race, I also don't want to have to carry the responsibility of being your representation. But the other part of that is, as we do advance, as we do make it up the ranks, how do we make space and create a seat for other Black people at the table? What, as leaders, what is our charge to do to create that space for other Black people within the organization?
Again, you have to have those conversations. I can tell you, being the only person at that with that seat at the table for years is very lonely. It's very lonely. You have no one to talk to. You constantly deal with collusion, constantly having to explain yourself, and then of course being a female on top of that, you know, it's a constant battle to be in those seats by yourself. And so because of that, I always ask, when are we going to bring some minorities on?
Mm-hmm.
On a board that I sit on, or I sat on, it is a prominent organization where probably 94% are white males. And I started challenging about, well, why don't we have any minorities? And they talked to me about the pipeline. And I said, well, how many Black people are in the pipeline? Well, we don't have any. So how are you going to bring Black people on if you don't have any in the pipeline that you're even looking at? The only thing that I can say is that person at that table has to continue to challenge that thought, the thought around bringing in minorities.
Mm-hmm.
It's no badge of honor for you to be the only one. And I've seen too many times where Black people don't push for other people. They don't push for other Black people. And when you do, there are consequences. And you have to understand that there will be consequences when you continue to push the envelope about things that people just don't want to do.
Right.
And if they don't want to do it, it's not going to happen, which is why we still see the majority of Fortune 500 CEOs that are Black, that are white men. There is no way that you can tell me that there are not any qualified Black people to be in those C-suites running those companies. And we have to continue to call it out. And then at some point, you've got to start taking action.
Right.
And that action, as I always tell people, the only thing that happens that makes a change is economics. Impact, impact change.
Right. All right, Ken, on you, because that's a question I really want to punt to you, especially being a leader in this space and working in HR and having to develop those programs whereby people go up that corporate ladder and there is development and there is the creation of the pipeline. What are you advising? What are you seeing other Black leaders do to create a space for other Black people at the table?
You're going to have to fight. You're going to have to push without being pushy. you really have to stick your neck out and create. Once you have that seat, you're trying to pull up another seat next to you for someone else that looks like you. I've worked and advised with companies that, they come out and say, oh, we're very diverse. Then when I start looking at the top leaders, they call diverse because they had white women and maybe an Asian person, but you still don't see an African American face of all this talent in the U.S. And so at that point, what we're looking at, one, we're looking at the pipeline, but then we're also looking at your internal pipeline. Who do you have internally in your company that's African American that's being developed to move into another seat, whether it's the director level, VP level, or C-suite, that's being prepped, and like you said, we stick to these unconscious biases because we are comfortable being around people that look like us. So leaders who are at the top are prepping people that look just like themselves. And what I challenge them is try to find someone that doesn't look like you, that doesn't think like you, and maybe you might get something different. Because if we all think alike, you're going to get the same outcome when it comes to products, when it comes to decision making. We're all going to be in agreement. Well, guess what? If you have a good product, I want someone there that's going to be able to push me to think differently, then maybe we can get to another point. But if you look just like me, think just like me, we're going to be in the same point we were a year ago. So I challenge them to look out and get people that don't look like them. Then even if the person looks like you, try to find someone that doesn't think like you, that thinks differently, that thinks outside the box. And that's how I challenge the senior leaders to create that pipeline internally and externally.
And then I also charge people to use the power of information. As leaders, everyone doesn't have access to information. And when you have access to information, you have a responsibility to use that information. So as a person that has been a leader in HR, I had access to salary data. I had access to performance data. I had access to promotion data. I had access to information so I could really call people on their stuff based on real data, not I think, or it looks like. No, these numbers show this is what performance appraisal have said. I can look and see what salary data is. I see Latrice asked a question about this, and we're going to open it up for questions in just a minute. So we'll definitely get to your question, Latrice. But I could see all of this information, and I could say, hey, from an equity perspective, we're out of line. Just like we do salary adjustment based on the market, just like we do equity adjustments. Hey, we're out of line, and here's what we can do. And even to Jackie's point earlier, we may not be able to give you a promotion right now, but I can look at these numbers and see salaries are out of whack. We can give you an equity adjustment, right? And so those are things that we can begin doing. But I also want to talk about the onus of us on kind of being authentic in the workplace. What we've noticed very recently is that a lot of Black people have said, you know what? I am no longer pretending that everything is okay. I'm going in and you're going to get the whole story about what's happening with me in this workplace. Where do you all stand on that? How authentic do you want people to be, or how authentic have you been about your experience in the workplace to your non-Black counterparts about the true essence of what it's like to be Black in corporate America? I'll pitch it to you first, Ken.
I think being authentic is very important because, we talk about microaggressions, we talk about unconscious bias, which I don't believe in unconscious bias. I want you to see me for who I am. I want to see you for who you are, and I want us to address those differences. And by us seeing those differences and not, straying away from them is what gets us to the point where we need to be. When I can see your differences and accept your differences for who you are, how you do business, what you look like, that's how we get to the next step. And I think that's very important for us I like to, like Jackie said, I'm not with the BS. I like to face the issues head on. I'm an HR leader too. When, you have meetings, let's invite everybody else in the room. So when we have these conversations, there's no he said, she said about what's going on and what's happening within the company. Everything is being addressed and thrown on the table. And so that way we're not throwing rocks and hiding our hands.
Absolutely. So on you, Jackie, what is your take on the authenticity we should bring into the workplace? How much is too much? And what should we be showing up as, and how authentic should we be about our Black experience in corporate America?
Well, the first thing I want to caveat this with is to say that they really don't care. That's the first thing is the corporations, they really don't care how you feel, because if they did, we would not be where we are today. So that's number one. This thing about being authentic, um, I think each person has their way that within their company, because it all depends upon the company's culture. Sometimes you run across those leaders who are compassionate and empathetic, and they may want to do what they consider the right thing, but they also don't want to push the envelope either if it's going to cause, discomfort to them. So when I hear Black people say, I'm done with this, I'm going to be my authentic self, I think they still have to weigh what that means in their company and to them. Now, for me, I feel like I became more authentic as time passed, because when you first start out, you're dealing with individual events and it's not really hitting you at that moment. But having worked for 30 years in corporate, I look back and see that it was 30 years of a lot of disappointments. A lot of disappointments from people taking your ideas, from you not getting promotions, from seeing other people not getting promoted, for them not getting pay equity, and for people always colluding against you. Now that sounds like, and I know a lot of people can relate to that, but that's why the Amy deal was so important, because she manifested what we all talk about in corporate America, where they use this power that they have to exclude you from moving up in the corporations. I've had a promotion given to me, went through the interview process, and when the CEO came back in town, the CIO came back in town, he basically rescinded it. He said, because I was not what people were expecting. So I asked him, I said, well, what are they expecting? I went to through your interview process. And he said, well, we wanted someone more experienced. I said, well, you interviewed those people. And so I requested an interview with him. Once he interviewed, he says, well, I just don't know you. I said, you don't know the people that you're hiring, that you want to hire. So once I met with him and he talked with me, he looked at me, he said, I've made a mistake, haven't I? And I said, the mistake that you made was being disrespectful to me and the process that you set in place to find you a senior candidate for this role. I said, it's just not right. So when I left, he called my boss and told him how amazing I was and to find me a position. So he promoted my boss and they promoted me at the same time. But I'm saying that those are not the type of things that should happen. What should happen is, if you are qualified, you should go through those processes and be treated with the same measuring stick that everyone else is. There was there's a post about I guess he was the CEO of McDonald's maybe. And
yes,
a friend and I were talking about this last night, where they did it. He wrote a letter and said he had an inappropriate relationship. So McDonald's claimed they did an investigation. They took his word, paid him $40 million and left. Now, all of a sudden, they come back and now they want their $40 million because they found out that he's had multiple relationships. My thing is, you took what he said in a letter and that was your response and you gave him $40 million. If you did your investigation on him, why are you going back saying that you found out something? Did you not investigate that in the first place?
mm-hmm.
Now, had that been a Black candidate, he would have been gone and he wouldn't have gotten $40 million. So there is a disparity in terms of how minorities are even treated from a believability perspective.
Right.
Where I have been told to give raises to a white guy because he needed to get custody of his kids.
Right.
And I'm like, well, hold up. We could give him that, but can we also give it to Nakisha, Larisha, and Momo? Can we also give it to them because one's husband is not working. Another one is having a new baby. So we need, so we need parity in all of this.
Right. And one of the things when you first started talking, you mentioned about the authenticity and how authentic you could be. And Caroline Wanga, who is the former chief HR officer at Target and is now over at Essence, she says something that I always tell my people, my clients that I work with. She says, if you can't be who you are, where you are, change where you are and not who you are. And that's so important because what we see is a lot of Black people, specifically Black women, are leaving the corporate environment in droves and starting their own businesses because they're saying, hey, I'm not going to change who I am. I'm going to change where I am. And we're seeing the negative impact of that. And corporate America is now asking, how do we get these people back? Because they're leaving, and not just leaving physically, but also leaving mentally. I can guarantee you, if we ask everybody in the chat right now, if you have a side hustle that you hope to one day be your real full thing, type yes for me. The people that are brave enough to type, I guarantee you most of those people will start typing yes, 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 yes. See, people will start typing that yes because they're mentally already checking out because they're not going to change who they are. They would sooner change where they are. So what I want to do now is I want to open it up to the audience. You can ask us questions and type it in the chat. We'll answer them. One question was already posed because a part of this is the inequality in pay. We already know that there's huge inequalities in pay from white people to Black people. And specifically, when we start talking about Black women, we're at the bottom of that pay scale. How do we begin to start addressing this equality in pay? How do we bring that topic up in the workplace? And I want to kick this one off to Ken first, because Ken, this is your area. This is HR. How does someone in an organization say, hey, I know my white counterparts are making more money than me, and what can we do about that? Ken, what's the best way for them to bring up those types of things, or even ask the question, hey, I think, because a lot of times it's just we think, we're not sure. How do they even approach that topic?
Yeah, so I would always say the first step too, people, when you go in places, you got to be for sure of yourself. So negotiation, number one, in the interview process, I always tell people with the first offer, if you don't feel comfortable and you know your worth, do not be afraid to negotiate. So that's the first step. I think sometimes we get an offer on the table as well and we don't negotiate. But then outside of the negotiation, like you said, in HR, I have these numbers. I'm looking at the discrepancies in pay for white men, white women, Black men, Black women. I'm seeing those. And so what companies are doing is, now that all of a sudden we see the world trying to make a turn, we see the George Floyd, we see Black Lives Matter, and now I have CEOs come up to me apologizing, and I'm like, well, what are you apologizing for? If you really want to show me you're sorry, show me with some cash, show your people with some money, show me in those equity adjustments that you are trying to do the right thing and make a change. And I would tell people to speak up, because everybody knows, we tell employees when we make offers, of course, we don't want you to talk about your offer. But guess what? Employees in your building will talk about salaries, what person used to make and who makes what. And I would tell people to don't be afraid to go to their managers and speak about your pay and adjustments and what people previously pay, as well as look at your job description. What are you doing? What has it changed? Address those things on the table and don't be afraid of repercussions. Because if we don't ever speak up, nothing's ever going to change. And like Jackie said, some things they're not going to care, but guess what? We have to go in there. We care, so we got to speak up about it, and don't be afraid of what's going to happen in the back end, because without any sacrifice, there's not going to be any success.
Right. And one of the things I encourage people to do is start off, and this is probably the conflict management mediator in me, is that when you make a statement, you're setting up for an argument. When you ask a question, you're setting up for a conversation. And so I always tell people, walk in asking questions, because the reality is we think. Most people within the organization don't have a factual basis. They think it's because of this, or they think this is the reality. They don't have access to everyone's salary. So the reality is, you may not actually know what that person's making. So start off with the question, hey, I think, or I've heard, can you verify this for me? Now that I have information and I should up with a question, because a question starts a conversation, not an argument, then we can go from there. But it's all about how we approach this. And it's not this meager, humble approach of, oh, please tell me what the salary is. It's just a factual statement. Hey, I think, can you verify, not tell me what the salary is, can you verify if there's an inequity in our salaries? It could be 5 cents. It's not equal, right? So Jackie, on your side, let's talk about that. How do you encourage people to approach this conversation of pay equity? How do they approach it?
It goes back to what Ken said, I believe, in terms of knowing your value and what you bring to the table, and being willing to walk away. Because when you start negotiating, you have to be willing to walk away, if people are not willing to give you, what you need. Um, and as far as pay equity, you really don't know what other people make, especially if you're starting at a company. You need to do your research to see what a position like that would pay, and then also look at the corporations to see if it's a small corporation, because all jobs are not created equal. Just like all titles are not the same across all companies. So you really have to evaluate that particular company, do your research on that company, and then understand what you bring to the table and what you're willing to do if you don't get a salary that you think is equitable for yourself.
And the important part of that is, and I love that both of you talked about negotiation. I can't tell you how many people I've offered jobs to, particularly Black people, and they were just excited, like, oh, I'm so happy to be working here. Yay. When do I start? And let's get the final things and get me in the system. And white counterparts have said that I am excited to work with you all. This sounds like a wonderful opportunity. So can I get back with you on that number? So for everyone, if you're in the job market, one great place to go and find salary data, it's free, it's salary.com. There's a paid version, but it's a great intro version for you, that can get you to an idea of what the salary is. So it's a great place for you to start to get market data, and salary.com can even tell you, like, based on location and title and things like that. But it's a great place for you to start to get an idea of what the salary should be. But the first offer is typically, in most instances, not the best offer you can get. And if you already started off 10, and I can honestly tell you this, I've seen people start off at a $10,000 difference just because of salary negotiations. 10,000, that's a lot to start from. So when you get your annual 2% raise, they're getting a 2% raise on that $10,000, and your 10% raise is not on that $10,000. When you think about that over a 20-year period, because when you leave, you often leave and go to another organization, and they ask you, what was your last salary? Well, your last salary was $10,000 less than theirs. If your career follows each other from the time of that $10,000, by the time you retire, we're talking about $1 million easily, right? So always negotiate. So Jay Bunch asked the question about it. What happens when you get into an organization and you are literally the only Black person on the team and you're treated poorly? How do you approach that? I'll throw that out to Jackie first, and we'll all get a chance to pitch in on that one.
I'm going to say something that's going to be unpopular. The fact that you are the only Black person says something about that organization.
Mm-hmm.
You can complain, but you need to be prepared to find another job. I mean, it's just cut and dry as that. And that's why I said that everybody's experiences in corporate America is different, and you have to evaluate the organizations that you are in. I coached a couple of young ladies earlier, where there are 4 people who have lost their jobs in the last several weeks. And it is because of the same thing that we're talking about right now. So what happened? You get furloughed. Your job is eliminated. So being the only one, you don't have any power, you don't have any control. And that's why it is important that we diversify organizations so that you are not the only one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and there's no fancy answer to that. I mean, I've been in those situations too. And you really just have to weigh that situation. And that may be the time when it's like, you know what, this is not the organization for me. I need to find me another job, another place, and do something different because this organization is not about me.
Absolutely. What about you, Ken, on that one? The only one and being treated poorly.
I agree with Jackie. As you can go to HR, but some of that divisive treatment that is hard to see through, or when you're in it, you know what's going on, but it's hard to prove sometimes. It's hard to see, and when you're in that type of environment, it is time for you to go, especially when you look around and you don't see people that look like you. And to me, it's sometimes top-down leadership means a lot from what others are going to do within the company. If the leader is the same way of those people on that team, there's almost nothing you can do. I've worked with leaders who they looked at diversity and inclusion as just checking the box, and they didn't really want things to change. They did it to do it because it's the thing to do, but they weren't ready to change the culture and the environment. And sometimes you got to move out to move up. I hate to say it, we want to stay and fight and change things, but sometimes you're not going to be able to change everything. You got to move out to move up sometimes.
That's a lifelong endeavor, what you just said, because that is key. People believe that they can change an organization and they just stay. And the next thing you know, you've been there 10 years and you've lost 10 years of revenue that you could have been bringing to your family by going to a place that that appreciates you. And sometimes we are just afraid to move.
Now that's the truth. And I'm going to say something a little bit contrary to what you two have said because we're not monolithic. The reality is, in some instances, I believe in the Kenny Rogers philosophy. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. And sometimes the difficult part of our experience is that there are times when, yes, we need to leave, but there are also times when we have to be the trailblazer because someone has to blaze the trail. And blazing a trail is never easy because that means the forest is there. It's great to come behind somebody and walk a path that's already made. But if a path has to be made, sometimes we are called to make that path. And you have to know that either that is your calling or it's not your calling. But if you decide, you know what, yes, this is my calling, I am here to blaze a trail in that event, in the event that you recognize this is what I'm supposed to be doing, when you're talking about these things, you have to talk about them in specificity. I can't tell you how many people have come and filed complaints in organizations where I was the head of HR and they said, I'm being treated poorly. And they couldn't quantify what that meant. So being able, and this is also helpful should you decide this poor treatment is going to result in a lawsuit. Being able to specifically quantify what that treatment is and what can be done to fix it and how you have spoken up about it. And sometimes it's also about, is it this team or is it this organization? Because I may recognize this team is crap, but I can work elsewhere in this organization, and this organization overall is not an organization that I want to leave. So being able to break down where the issue really lies and speak to the issue with specificity is very, very important, especially especially if you decide this is the place I want to be, and I'm going to hold the organization accountable for making this right for me and people like me in this organization.
You know, I want to address what you just said, though, about that. That is the problem that we have in being Black in corporate America, because we're always having to blaze trails. That is a lot of mental anguish, feels physical anguish, and it is a hard road. I have been that person so many times, because when you're the only one, that's what that means, is that you are a trailblazer. But it weighs on you spiritually, it weighs on you physically, and it is not an easy place to continuously be. Even though you may blaze that trail, look around the corporations. I'm having the same conversation with you here today in 2020 that I had in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, my 50s. It's the same conversation. So something is wrong in terms of why we're still having conversations about being a trailblazer in 2020. We already had the trailblazer. The problem is that they get rid of that person and replace it with another person. So there are legions of trailblazers of one.
And was that trail really blazed? If you went through it, now you're gone, and the next person is going through exactly what you went through. And I think why people don't blaze trails today too. I have, like you said, I have people that sit across me all the time to bring issues to me saying they're not being treated well. And I ask them, I like to ask their ideas. Well, what do you think we should do? You and I working together. And they realize there's sacrifice that comes with that. You could look at Colin Kaepernick. He blazed the trail and was never able to play in the NFL again. At the end, it may have benefited him. We don't know financially, but he was never able to play in the NFL again. And I think people are afraid of repercussions. They're looking at, they have bills to pay, they have children, they need a job. So they're afraid to take those steps to blaze a trail because of, the monetary reasons that they need a paycheck. And sometimes they sit there and they'll bring it to me like they want me to personally fix it. Well, I said, it's us together. I need you involved in this for me to, they weren't treating me bad. They were treating you bad. Let's go in there as a team and address it. But sometimes they back down because they realize what Jackie just said, that sacrifice.
And that is the hard part. The hard part is that blazing a trail comes with sacrifice. Like one of the things that we miss, people always talk about the Montgomery bus boycott, and we forget that they didn't decide, okay, we're gonna boycott on Friday and then we're gonna ride the bus on Monday. That's not how that worked. These people walked to work for a long time. They did not use the buses, and there is sacrifice that comes with it. But to Jackie's point, we've been doing this for a long time, and it can be exhausting. And we have to think about the mental anguish that goes with it, which is why so many people, I'm one of them, that just decided this is not what I want to do. I want to go where I can truly blaze a trail. And blazing the trail for me is not blazing it within your organization. It's blazing it with my own, because I ascertain I don't want to sit at your table. I'll build my own table and pass out invitations. I have no desire to ask and beg you for a seat. What I'll do is build mine, and you may be invited and you may not be invited. That's just how it works. So in our last few minutes together, I want to give Ken and Jackie a second to give us what's the charge now that we've kind of had this discussion. And you all, this discussion can go on for days and days and days. We haven't even cracked the surface because we haven't even talked about the mental capacity. Jackie talked about a little bit, that mental anguish. Ken talked about building a pipeline and working collaboratively with HBCUs. There is so much we could talk about, and an hour is not nearly enough time. So we may even come back for a part 2 of it. But really quickly, you all, just give us a charge, just one thing that you want people to take away from this conversation, leave this call and actually go and begin to do back in the workplace, an action item for them to do. And I'll let you go first, Ken.
So the first thing I would say is it's not going to happen overnight. So it's something we have to work on and not give up on. We just heard Jackie say in her 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Okay, stop. Going further.
She said, I'm not going to go any further. She said this is something she's been dealing with, and this is 2020, and we're dealing with some of the same issues. So it's not going to happen overnight, but I think it's a collaborative teamwork with everyone in your company, whether you're pushing people, working with people, and if you are that person that gets a seat at the table, or whether you create a new table, bring people with you. Mm-hmm. Don't leave anybody behind. Whether it's one person you bring with you, bring somebody with you, because then now that person could bring somebody with them, then that person brings somebody with them, and we'll keep this thing moving forward.
Wonderful. All right, Jackie, on you. What's our charge?
So our charge is to work to change, to implement social change. Without social change, there is not going to be any corporate change, because corporations are microcosms of our society. The people who behave certain ways in society, they bring that into the workplace. You need to get engaged, get involved with changing what's going on in society. You have to challenge these companies and challenge them from a financial perspective, so that people are not protesting by themselves. Mm-hmm. We left the people at Reebok and Adidas, and the reason I bring that up, because I don't want to lose that, we left them out there protesting by themselves when they're telling you what's going on, and we are silent. The CEO said, it has not affected my dollars. So since it has not impacted their revenue, how much change do you think that they're actually going to make inside their corporations? So our charge is to be socially active, to be sure that we address those corporations who disrespect us, minimize our education, and refuse to engage us in policy making within corporations that drive the business forward. Getting a chief diversity officer is not progress.
Absolutely. And my charge is to do something. Go from these things that we're having, they're just conversations, but conversations without commitment does not equal an outcome. And that's really what we want to see. We want to go from conversation to commitment to outcome. So the idea of doing nothing, if you do nothing, you are complicitly accepting what the status quo currently is. The action item is to leave here and do something. Go talk to a leader, use your voice, take an action, recognize when people are treated differently, and speak up about it, even if it's not you. Because when we begin to speak up for each other, that's what the game changer is. So I'm going to turn it back over to Teresa, our host, to close us out. Thank you all so much for joining us and engaging in this conversation. Teresa?
Wow, that was an incredible event. I would like to thank our moderator, Ms. Deidre Giles, and our panelists, Jackie Russian and Kenneth Stewart, and of course you, our guests. So stay abreast of part 2 and any upcoming events. So follow me at TSEdwards_author on IG, or go to my website, www.tsedwardsauthor.com. This concludes this event. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Please stay safe. Salute.